Safety. It's a big thing in the workshop. If you don't feel safe doing something, or you just don't feel comfortable, don't do it. You're the only person who can keep you safe. And if you don't do it, no one else can.
Well, good day, friends. This is a little video on a tool which is becoming very, very popular with me at the moment. I used to make soft touch centers that would go on the Powermatic or one-way type live centers, and to do that I would tap a 3/4 inch hole in a block of wood. Just take an old block of wood like this, drill a hole and tap a 3/4 inch hole in it with a machine tap. I would take a machine tap and tap the block, and that worked good for a number of years. But I started making some pepper mills, and a friend of mine was making pepper mills, and we were trying to look for a better method to center the bore of the pepper mill with the outside when you turned it. And we evolved the soft touch center a little bit, and the way we did that was we took some of these, well, we started off with just regular nuts, but this is a long nut, the kind of nut that's used for joining threaded rod. I have a smaller one here. This is a 3/8, and you can see that given a 3/8 piece of threaded rod, it's long enough to thread the rod in one end and then thread another rod in the other end. So these are long nuts, and they're not always threaded all the way through. They stop in the middle sometimes, because the intent is really to join two pieces of threaded rod together. So we started off using regular nuts and gluing a regular nut into a piece of wood. But that evolved to getting some of these bigger nuts, joining nuts, and cutting them in half. So we take this, I take this and I'd cut it in half down through the middle, and then I would put it in my metal lathe and turn down the outside here so that it was about 1 inch. Okay, so how to do that? Well, fortunately my friend was able to obtain an M2 stub shaft that we buy from Busy Bee. Here in Canada we buy them from Busy Bee Tools, and they're called an MT2 stub arbor, and their part number is B460. So that's one place that you can get them. I'm sure there's other places, and if you look online I'm sure you'll find these stub shafts with an MT2 end on here. It has a 3/8 tapped hole in this end, so it's ideal. You can use a drawbar. This goes through the head of the lathe, so you put your MT2 stub shaft, into your headstock of your lathe, and you use a drawbar like this into the MT2, and then of course when it's through the headstock you can just wind this up tight to pull it back into the headstock so it doesn't come loose. The trick here is when you get one of these stub shafts, they normally come, oops, that's the wrong one. They normally come like this. Okay, this is just straight here, parallel, and then it has the MT2 and it has the 3/8 threaded hole. So a very useful little item, and they cost about $10, so not terribly expensive. Here's one that you can see what I did. I just filed a flat on it and it became a pin chuck. I could put a nail in there, and when it turns it will jam. So I drill a 1-inch hole in the block of wood, put a nail in, turn it, and it will jam. It's a pin chuck, and you can see there. But also I put a 3/8 tapped hole in the end, so that my little buffing wheels, I can just mount this in my headstock, put my little buffing wheels with a 3/8 bolt on them in here. So it has a couple of purposes, this one. I don't use it as a pin chuck very often. I just don't find I have a need for a pin chuck. But at one point I thought I would have, and I was using it for holding bowls. But I don't do that anymore. So just to show you, it's a very useful little tool. Can be used for a number of things. And my friend was able to get, we took this same tool and he got it turned down with a thread on the end, a 3/8 thread. I have a little metal lathe, but it's really just not accurate enough for thread cutting. So I'm very lucky to have this, and why I'm lucky to have this is because I can mount this in the headstock, and then when I have my rough block of wood that has my half of the long nut glued into the piece of wood, oops, good fit, glued into the piece of wood like this. I just use epoxy glue. I can mount this in the headstock, put this onto it, screw this on in the headstock, and I can turn whatever shape I want on here. And so whether it's a shape like this, or whether it's a shape like this, whatever, I can turn that on here, and then mounted in the headstock I will have whatever shape I've turned on it, and you turn the shape to suit the job you're doing. For example, this is one I use on pepper mills, and I would have this in my headstock, and because the 3/4 National Course 10 thread per inch thread that we put on here fits this nut, it also fits the Powermatic or one-way live center. So you can make these by turning them in your headstock to whatever shape you want, and you can have one for your live center and one for your headstock. So you can drive something between two of them. You can have them mounted and drive whatever you want to do through them. Very, very convenient. It's a fairly new tool to us, maybe 6 months now, and we're finding more and more uses all the time for it. For example, I also made some smaller ones with a 3/8 threaded hole in them, and you can see here I've glued one of those into this compression chuck here. It's just a little chuck that you slide a ring along, and because of all the slots it will close and you can grip. I use this for making pendants, and this mounts on, in this case I've been using it on my little eccentric chuck like this, and using it for making pendants. But you can see easily that with this one that I showed you with the 3/8 tapped hole in, all I would need is a little length of 3/8 bolt or something put in there, and then I could screw this directly on there if I wanted. So your imagination is the limit here, and as I say, we're finding more and more uses for these. Now, one of the things that is probably the most difficult thing to get for this is this little stub shaft. And if anybody knows where you can buy one with a thread on the end, please leave me a comment, and everyone will be able to see them where they could get them. But if you can't, what you can do is just take one of the stub shafts that you buy, and they are, you know, if you're not in Canada and you don't have access to Busy Bee, I'm sure there's other stores that sell them. What you can do is, even in your wood lathe you can do this. If you don't have a metal lathe, you can take this and drill it, put it in the headstock. Don't forget, use a drawbar, put it in your headstock, put the drawbar in it, tighten it up in the headstock so it's good and secure. Then use a center drill. This is a center drill traditionally used in metalworking environment, much more so than woodworking, but it works equally well in woodworking, by the way. Nice stubby little center drill, and put this in your headstock, and first of all drill, make a point in it. You only have to go down, sort of down to about there, halfway up the taper, for example, into it. It gives you a nice center point to start your drill. Then I would say take something like a 1/4 inch drill, drill down till you're within a 1/4 inch of this back shoulder. Then open that up. You're going to be looking for a tapping drill for the 3/4 thread. Okay, so first you're going to start with a smaller drill, 1/4 inch drill, maybe a 1/2 inch drill, and step up to this drill. Now you're drilling in steel, so slow your lathe down. You need nice slow RPM to drill this. You drill this out, and then you tap it. Now to keep your tap straight while you're tapping it, because you're going to need a wrench or something to turn your tap, and this is a normal tap handle, but if you don't have a normal tap handle like this, you can use a wrench. But to ensure that it stays straight when you're tapping it, you're going to need to mount a center drill, a live center or dead center, it doesn't matter, in your tailstock. And in the back of the tap is normally a little hole that your center will go in. And you just keep your tailstock tight up to it so that it holds the tap straight while you're tapping it in. And you just need to keep the center snugged into that hole until you get it well started. And after it's well started, then you don't need this anymore, and you can just tap the hole. Now, having tapped the hole into the end of your stub shaft, you can take a 3/4 bolt, 3/4 national course, like 10 threads per inch bolt, and tighten that in there, and put some glue on it to keep it in there. J&B Weld is excellent for that kind of a job. And then cut it off. Cut it off so that it sticks out. This one here is 5/8 of an inch. This comes out, and I say that's just about ideal. Let's have a look at our. Oops! Oh, this sticks out. This sticks out. Well, the thread is about 5/8, but then you have this little conical section sticks out another 1/4 inch or so. So say 3/4 of an inch would be fine. So you've drilled and tapped your hole in there. You put a bolt in. You glue the bolt in, J&B Weld or 2-part epoxy, and then you cut off the end of the bolt, leaving just threads sticking out 3/4 of an inch, and you have produced one of these. And this mounts in your headstock, and that's what you put your block on to turn it. Having turned it, you can take it off, and that you can take it off. That's why I left a little bit of the thread, the hexagon of the nut. When I cut the nut in half and I turned it down to 1 inch, I left a little bit protruding up so that you end up with enough sticking out, about 1/4 of an inch, that you can put a wrench on. You might need to put a wrench on to take it off of your stub shaft or off of your lathe center. And so there, that's what we're using at present, and we're finding more and more uses all the time. It's really nice to have something that's very repeatable. Every time I put this back on my stub shaft, because it's a steel thread and because it has a steel end on it and it goes up against the shoulder, it goes back to exactly the same position it was the last time I put it on. There's no difference. It runs true, but even if it isn't running quite true, you can always take a tool and just clean it up and make it true again. It's a wonderful little tool. We don't really have a name for it other than the name that I think Captain Eddie gave it, and that's Soft Touch. So it's a soft touch with a nut in the end, and it works wonderfully. And the fact that you're able to mount it in your headstock and turn means you can turn between a pair of them that you can custom shape. So that's my little tool I wanted to show you. I got a couple of requests actually from some of my viewers to explain a little bit more about this. They'd seen me use it, and that's it. That's about all I can tell you about it. I really like it. My friend, two local friends who turn with me. One helped me develop the idea, and the other one has a set too, and we all find it very useful, and I hope you do too. So that's a little tool that I hope you're able to make. If you have any questions, please just leave me a comment. Another reason why I showed you this tool is I plan on making a video in the near future, or in a month or so, who knows when, of making the way that I make pepper mills, which requires that you have something like this. Now, you could mount a block of wood in your chuck, right? There's nothing to stop you mounting a block of wood in your chuck on the lathe and turn whatever shape you want on the end. So you don't have to have this. The only thing is, if you take it out of the chuck, you're probably not going to be able to put it back in and it go back exactly the same way, but you can always turn it again. So you don't have to have this. And on the other end, you could just tap the block of wood and it would work. It just doesn't repeat very much, and wood doesn't hold threads very well. Regular wood, you know, like I use a lot of ash just because I have some ash, don't hold threads that you're going to be screwing onto steel and taking off and expecting them to repeat and go back to the same place. After I've been using some of my old soft touch centers for a while, the threads strip off when they're gone. So this was the solution to it. It's wonderful. Okay, that's it. I'm going to wrap this up here, and this is number 2 for 2015. Talk to you guys later. Bye now.